Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Panzerkampfwagen KW-756R, a currently Tier 3 5.0 BR heavy tank that exists as a premium vehicle for the German Ground Forces tech tree. To make it easier, I'll just refer to this vehicle as the German KV-1. In this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about it, including its stats, how it plays, its strengths and weaknesses, some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation on if I think that this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. As always, please subscribe if you like more content like this, as you'll be given extra German steel to protect your tank. But without further ado, let's get into the video. And first, I'll place his stats here on the side of the screen. Stats to know are its overall armor, armor pen, and reload speed. And now, for how it plays. Well, the German KV-1 is basically a pre-Tiger, but of course with a German twist. This vehicle is very well armored from the front, as well as in general on the turret, with 105mm of armor around the turret and 100mm of armor at the front of the vehicle, making this the most well-armored KV-1 in-game, at least arguably. This presents it with the ability to bounce shells of lesser armed vehicles, such as from lower BR Shermans, T-34s, and similar British tanks. Even the sides and rear of the German KV-1 have decent armor, with upwards of 70 or even 75mm of armor throughout, making it so that bouncing shots against the side, given proper angling, is a fairly good possibility, at least in a down tier. The cannon is also excellent, as it is the long German 75mm that is on the more advanced versions of the Panzer IV. It can shoot through upwards of 135mm of armor, depending on range and attack angle. Combine this with the phenomenal reload speed of around 6 to 7 seconds for most people, depending on crew skill, and you have an excellent vehicle. Again, at least in a down tier. As mentioned before, it has great frontal armor and can easily ward off lesser tanks, but will not stand up to upgun variants of the Sherman, T-34, and similar vehicles. Ultimately, how it plays depends heavily on if you're in an up tier or in a down tier, more than with most vehicles. In a down tier, it can play as a frontliner that can bounce tons of shells in cramped quarters, like in streets or from behind cover. It will be able to one-shot most enemies when in a down tier as well. Notably, however, its speed is mediocre, with an only 34km/h top speed, making it so that flanking in any scenario is typically not going to be an option with the German KV-1. If in an up tier, your role as a frontline tank will be made obsolete by the presence of Panthers and Tigers on your team, and because most enemies, even in a simple up tier, will be able to pen your frontal armor by this point, as the Russian 85mm, American 76mm, and other similar cannons become much more common with each BR increment that you increase, as well as more advanced shells like Heat FS. In an up tier, especially when facing 5.7 BR tanks and above, it is best to act as a support tank when using the German KV-1, sitting behind cover and behind enemy lines, trying to pick off enemy tanks with your good, though of course weakening 75mm cannon. It can still destroy higher BR tanks, but your ability to do so rapidly decreases with each BR increment that you increase, more so than with most tanks. In short, this vehicle can play how it wants in a down tier, sans at least flanking for the most part, but is relegated to a support role in an up tier. This wasn't as big of a problem when the German KV-1 was 4.7 BR, but oh how times have changed. Now with that said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses, and I'll start off with its strengths. First, it has potent frontal armor, which oftentimes means many bounce shots in a down tier. Secondly, it has a good 75mm cannon that is both accurate, pens a decent amount of armor, and has decent post-pen damage. It loses its luster in up tiers, however. Third, you have optional APCR shells that boost the cannon's penetrating power, if of course you need that extra kick. Fourth, it has an excellent reload rate that can drop to below 6 seconds with an ace crew. Fifth, though overall slow, it can still accelerate up to around 20km/h fairly decently. And finally, it has good RP and Silver Lion bonuses for being a premium vehicle of this rank. Now for weaknesses, of course the German KV-1 has mediocre mobility with a 34km/h top speed. Second, while it has good frontal armor, it means very little in an up tier. Angling, as you would expect, is required on this vehicle. Third, it features a fairly large commander's cupola, which means that, though it is fairly well armored, an APHE shell can typically penetrate it and kill at least one crew member in the turret. Fourth, the German KV-1 features a poor turret traverse rate, averaging around 11 degrees per second of turret traverse, and that's with a fairly decently trained crew. For its fifth weakness, the German KV-1 has a very cramped its turret, meaning that total turret crew kills are very common. Beyond this, it has poor gun depression, and finally, it has no top-mounted MGs, making it so that you will have very few defenses against aircraft. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into some scores. Now, first, for armament, I give the German KV-1 a 6.5 out of 10. This, as with the next category that I'll be grading, is extremely BR dependent. While it can function more or less decently through around 5.7 BR, or even up to 6.0 BR, depending on the tanks that you face and of course where you hit, it just doesn't have the same power as similar BR cannons like the American 76mm, the Russian 85mm, the better 75mm on German Panthers, and whatever the heck British used around this BR. In a down tier, however, it still dominates. It took a fairly big hit when it was moved to 5.0 BR in RB, but it still functions fairly well. The best thing about its cannon is its amazing reload that will allow you to have quick follow-up shots in case your first one does not damage the opponent. Aside from this, it is very accurate and has good post-pen damage. It's just really a matter on if you can actually make it through in the first place. That typically becomes a problem in higher BRs when facing more well-armored enemies. Now, for survivability, I give this a 6.5 out of 10. While the German KV-1 is one of the best armored KV-1s, especially on the turret and in the front of the tank, it is still a KV-1 and thus has relatively limited armor overall. It is in some ways like if the Tiger was a 5.0 BR tank with the scaled down armor and cannon to match. In a down tier, the German KV-1 is extremely effective and will bounce tons of shots off the front of the hull and the turret, with those same shots turning into pens in up tiers. So again, survivability is largely dependent on the BR of your enemies. Regardless, it also has decent side armor, which means that you can also use that to bounce shots at an angle. The main thing working against the German KV-1 is the cramped crew compartments, with this being especially bad in the turret. A single penetrating hit will oftentimes kill the entire turret crew, or worse yet, the entire tank crew. Now finally, for mobility, I give the German KV-1 a 4 out of 10. While definitely on par with other heavy tanks at or around this BR, the German KV-1 simply lacks the mobility, especially uphill, to match similar BR tanks. Very well armored tanks such as the Panther and Tiger tanks, as well as the upgun Shermans and T-34s, exist within the BR range of this vehicle, making the German KV-1 both outgunned and outmatched in terms of mobility in many instances. Now finally, overall, I give this vehicle a 6 out of 10. While many people may take issue with this rating, I feel that it is fair. Given the current 5.0 BR of this vehicle, it can still be absolutely dominant in a match, but it has lost a bit of its edge in the transition from 4.7 to 5.0 BR. If it were still 4.7 BR, I'd likely give the German KV-1 a 7 or even a 7.5 out of 10, but the much better vehicles that it faces, along with the much higher rate of up tiers that it will find itself in due to the glut of 6.0 BR vehicles and matchmaking, means that this vehicle is now one of many on the battlefield, rather than being a singular force that will always be feared. And now for my final recommendation, and I'll just start with this. The biggest problem with this vehicle, I find, is not that it's bad, because of course it isn't, but because its BR severely hampers the lineup that you can build around it. For example, despite the massive size of the German ground tech tree, there is only a single vehicle that shares its 5.0 BR, and that's the Ostwind 2. Only one vehicle is currently 4.7 BR in the German ground forces tech tree, and that is the Pack Puma, of which regularly sells for $1,500+ USD in the War Thunder marketplace. Meanwhile, 5.3 BR and 4.3 BR are absolutely loaded with vehicles. This makes a situation where you either have to have a fairly weak lineup around you if you decide to pick a lineup with the lower BR tanks, or the German KV-1 ends up being a weak link because you decided to use 5.3 BR vehicles or higher. Regardless, it puts you in a bad spot. Thankfully, the cannons on the 4.3 BR tanks are largely sufficient for up tiers, but these vehicles either lack mobility, armor, a fully traversable turret, or some combination of these things. But that's about the company that the German KV-1 keeps, rather than how it performs. In general, I still really like this vehicle, and for a price of $2,980 GE, or give or take around $20 USD, I feel that it is still largely worth purchasing. Its main issue at this point as a grinder is that it is a rank 3 vehicle, meaning that you can only grind through rank 4 with it at least without penalty, whereas a vehicle like the Panzerbeauftragten 6P is rank 4 and can research through the juicy rank 5 without penalty. This, however, costs around 2 times as much GE as the German KV-1, so the German KV-1 still looks like a mighty fine deal. With all this said, do I recommend the German KV-1? Yes, I do. While it took a hit going to 5.0 BR, it can still do fairly well in a match, and will typically dominate or at least do very well in a down tier, all while being relatively inexpensive for a premium vehicle of this BR. It isn't perfect, but it is still a fairly fun tank that will destroy nearly every tank that it will fight, granted that you know the weak spots. So yes, I do recommend this vehicle, and I give it the Tankenstein seal of approval, but just barely for the Tankenstein seal of approval. Now, that being said, let me know what you guys think about this video. Do you like the German KV-1? Dislike it? Do you think that it should be 4.7 BR, 5.0, some other BR? Let me know in the comments below. This is your time to say it. Either way, thanks again for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. You know the dealio, and I will see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.